storm. Come flood sun. The moon is still, so dry of our soul. To land and wealthy and cool, or come penniless to the pool. We are all floating fools, so sail our soul. Easy to land. Aram, helpless, divided, effervescent, losing everything. Strange that I feel like we're drowning, but there's no pressure. Oh. And every sigh whispers dreams of a better life, stretches the seasons and breaks the ties. So break us down, so we can meet the land. 'Cause ever we're shapeless and hiding underneath it all. Strange that I feel my resistance, but I keep on. Strange that I feel underwater, but I sit dry as a bone. Every storm, every storm, every storm.
Hey, welcome to the new setup. I have moved house, which is why things look very different, why I've not been posting anything for a while. So I'm currently trying to find the vibe that I'm going for. I've got a few ideas, so this is the first one. And I thought this would be a good way to talk about that music video, talk you through one, kind of the concept and working with Charlie, two, the equipment I used, and three, how I lit it. And then, not in this video, but maybe in a later video, I'll talk about how I color graded it. First off, Charlie and I go way back. So ever since school, we've been in the same class and known each other. Funnily enough, we didn't actually see each other for years, and then ended up bumping into each other at a London tube station and realized we lived about a 10-minute walk away from each other. And since then, Charlie's been in one of my short films, and I've gone and watched Charlie perform, and we've spoken about making a music video together. That's where this all started, and we have a plan to make a proper music video in the coming weeks and months. But because things were proving to be a little hectic this time of year, rather than just kind of push everything off, we thought, why don't we just make like a live lounge version of a different track, just so we can start filming something and then getting our workflow going again. And that's exactly what we did. So let me grab some of the equipment and then I'll walk you through everything I used for this shoot. All right, so how did I shoot that? There's one thing you come away from this, it is how much of a cheapskate I am. So first things first, what did I shoot this on? I used the Blackmagic Ursa Mini Pro 4.6K, the G1, not the G2 or the 12K, and I used the Canon C200 for the wide. So everything on the wide was this camera, everything else was this one. I really like both these cameras. I shot in the ProRes, the 422 version on this one, and then I shot just in the 8-bit MP4 version on the C200. And I thought it matched up quite well, which was nice. So I was pleasantly surprised with that. I'm a big fan of both of these. I use this for most of my commercial work and I use this for all my YouTube stuff. Yeah, so these are two cameras that I shot on. And then I use the Spider Checker 24 to match them. So if you don't know how this works, on one side you have a gray card, and then on the other side you have all the different colors. And then in DaVinci Resolve you can just match these up. So in theory, as long as you've shot the cameras in similar exposures and similar log profiles, etc., white balance, all of that, it will do a pretty good job of matching all of that up for you. So then when you're grading from a similar place. It's not perfect, but it did quite a lot. So from memory, how I graded this was on the Ursa. I used this, and I think I may have actually ended up just using a LUT I've created and then tweaking it quite a bit. But what I probably did then was turn this into a color space that suited this a bit more. But hey, I might be wrong. To be honest, I don't really use these that often, but I'm beginning to use them a bit more. I actually thought I'd lost it for the best part of a year, and then once I moved house, it just turned up. So, you know, that was a win. These can cost so much money, it's ridiculous. So the Spider Checker 24 is one of the cheaper ones. They all work just as well. DaVinci Resolve has this profile in there, so there's no real benefit to getting the really expensive ones unless you want to just be a baller. But you know, that was good enough for me. Lens-wise, I shot on the 24mm, a Sigma 24mm, Sigma Art version for the wide. And then for the dolly shot, which I'll come to in a minute, I used the, what is this, Zeiss Contax 50mm 1.7. I actually don't love this lens. It's a bit sharp for my liking. It's not a bad lens, it's just, yeah, I don't love it, but it was the right focal length for what I wanted to do. So, you know, there's a bit of a difference in terms of lens quality between them, but yeah, is what it is. And then some of the other shots, all the handheld stuff was on the, it was either, and I can't actually remember, it was either the Sigma 24mm or the Sigma 35mm, but there are about 2 shots from the Canon 100mm macro 2.8. It was just too close, to be honest. It was just not the right vibe, but there were 2 shots in particular. I'll post them, I'll kind of put them here somewhere. That actually worked really well for. Then on the wide, I had a 1/8 Pro Mist, and on the side shot, I don't think I actually had anything, which I've only got the 1/8 Pro Mist, so even though I have a DIY version, it's just a little bit too strong in comparison. It's more of a 1/4 Pro Mist effect. Maybe you can tell, I did add some glow effect afterwards in post, but the wide is a little bit softer and the close-up is softer than the side angle, which is a little bit harsher. So that might be the fun stuff to you. To me, that's the boring stuff. Cameras, lenses, like it's cool, but there's more fun things to talk about when making this video. So the first thing is actually like the setting and the backdrop. I really wanted a kind of cozy cabin vibe, which I think I got. But because wood is very similar skin tone to skin, very similar tone to skin tone, I felt like I needed some sort of separation, which is where the backdrop came into it. Now this is where you're about to see just how much of a cheapskate I actually am. So also, don't know if you recognize this little beauty. This is my DIY film cart. If you haven't seen the video for that, I'll drop a little call out there. But yeah, let me show you the backdrop. So this is a rollout blind curtain that I got from Dunelm for £3. All I did was take off the kind of little roll bit that sits on the end, which you can't see because it's not focused, but you get the idea. And instead, I thread a boom arm through it, C-stand boom arm. That is the cheapest backdrop you can ever get, and it's really convenient. The slight issue I have, and I've always had it with this, and I don't know if it's because of the fabric or the color or a bit of both, the way it absorbs light, it shows up banding quite strong, you know, way more than a paper backdrop. So I would be curious to get a different one and see if it did the same thing. But for this video, in 10-bit, it seems fine. On the wide 8-bit, it verges, you know, the way I graded it, I think it's okay, but sometimes it can be noticeable when I've used it in other videos. So yeah, that's just a word of warning, but £3 backdrop, pretty great. And then to rig it, so I would have used just a normal C-stand boom arm, but someone out there, and they know who they are, still has my boom arm, because I only got the one of them. It's my own fault, I left it on a job for them. But I've completely forgot that, and then it got to the morning, and I was picking Charlie up from the train station, and I realized that, yeah, I didn't actually have any pole thin enough to go through the center of the roll-up line. So I went to B&Q and picked up a 19mm diameter tube, which is hollow. I think I've actually left the tape on there, but yeah, it is soft metal, I would say, but it's actually been okay so far. So it's not the most secure thing in the world. Like sometimes when I put the knuckle on and I crank it up, it will then kind of fall a little bit, which I don't know if that's just because I've got an old knuckle or this is just soft and kind of, you know, giving way a little bit. I actually think it's somewhere between the two, but £10. I was gonna buy another boom arm, didn't really have the time, couldn't really be bothered to spend the money. This works fine. So for me, that's a boom arm and a backdrop for £13, which is pretty good, I would suggest. And then obviously like the knuckle and the C-stand, but that is what it is. And then things in the background, they were just, you know, mise-en-scene, just props. So one of them is this lamp here. This lamp was £14 from charity shop. I bought it the day before. I bought two. I almost didn't buy this one because there's something about the stand that's, it's kind of interesting, oops, but it's kind of ugly. And the other lamp I bought was really nice, but I was like, do you know what, I'm gonna get it because I just have a feeling. And the other lamp turned out being completely wrong, and this one turned out being perfect. The lampshade is quite thick, so normally with a lamp, it's quite hard to control the exposure with the bulbs that are naturally inside. So this did a really good job there, but I did swap the light bulb out. So I bought a little while ago, these are old school light bulbs, which industrially are not allowed anymore. But as far as I'm aware, correct me if I'm wrong, home use or props is okay. That's because they're very high power consumption. The benefit is they don't flicker compared to like LED lights. If I'm being honest, I cannot remember how strong it is. I think, so I have 40, 60 and 100 and it looks like a 40, but you know, it's a bayonet and you always have to be careful when you're buying all light bulbs to make sure that it fits whatever lamp you have. So I have bayonet and screw thread versions of all of these. I'm not necessarily recommending these because they are very high power consumption. They're probably quite hard to buy now. So you should just be buying like the LED film ones, but they're so expensive. So, you know, again, cheapskate. I'm gonna come to the lighting in a minute, but before that, I messaged Charlie earlier and I asked what are the mics and the system that you use for that, because he did all the sound. So he bought his sound stuff, which suits me fine. I do have sound bits and pieces, but he had a workflow that he was happy with. So he was using a Behringer B1 condenser mic into an interface, which was a Behringer UMC22, and that was going into Ableton. The key thing is that I made sure the sample rate was 48, not 44. So I shot at 24 frames per second. 48 naturally will sync up with that. 44, you might get some drift, which sucks. So I was like, don't want that. The way I actually recorded this was we did a couple of takes just to get into the pattern, but it was the wide and the dolly as a pair. And after we'd done a few takes of that, I went handheld just for one take. I actually always feel a lot more confident handheld. So for me, I always knew that was like my get out of jail free card. The tripod and the dolly shot, they took a bit more time to finesse. Well, the tripod not so much, but the dolly shot just to make sure I got it right. So I think we did 5 takes in total, and I used clippings from 3 of them. So it's mostly one track from the final tripod dolly that we did, but I did swap out 1 or 2 bits of audio with the handheld version just to sync it up a little bit better. Occasionally, maybe they just perform something slightly differently. So yeah, so for the handheld stuff, I tried to mix in the actual handheld take where I could, just to make it feel a little bit more natural really. All right, so the most important part really is lighting. Lighting is always the key to good or bad cinematography. There's so many other factors, yes, but there's no point having a high resolution camera and the best lenses if you don't know how to light something. So let me explain how I lit this. Again, you'll realize just how much of a cheapskate I actually am. So first off, the location did quite a lot for me in the sense that the doors and the windows, they have a like a diffusion roller blind already on them, and they actually give off a really nice quality of light. They're probably a little too bloomy for me personally. You know, they've got also a tiny bit of a green tint, but to have that just there was absolutely amazing. So I basically have one side of the wall already diffused up for me, one nice big soft source. So what I did to enhance that was I added in a big key light. So I had an Aperture 300D just out of frame on the right side of the frame. And that was there to really pick up Charlie's features and hit the guitar. It also gives a bit of consistency where using natural light can be a little bit problematic with the light dipping in and out. So yeah, so that's why I had a big key light. Now I don't have a nice Aperture softbox, which is really dumb because I would and should, I would like one. Instead, I have I think it's a Godox diffusion. It's not terrible, but the way you put it up is with this umbrella feature, which I don't really like, and you can't use a gel holder, and just using gels in general on this is really difficult. The bag that carries it has broken, and the grid on the front, I'm not entirely sure how it's happened, but it's just kind of got worn and broken and just not very good, basically. It's like a very soft fabric. So I don't recommend the softbox. I bought it because it was about half the price, and on the whole, I don't mind Godox. I think they're a pretty good brand. But yeah, I would not recommend that. But I'm using it now, and it's okay. It does a job. Just down the line, I'm going to replace that with something a little nicer. And then the other light I had, which is on now, is a Falcon Eyes 18T. I think T. It's a daylight one, so in my head I'm thinking it should be D, but I have a feeling it's called T. Whatever. So this is rigged up the top, and I've done that using tension rods that are about a tenner, I think, from Amazon, which I'll leave a link to below. So I have two of these rods, and then I have the actual rolling flat light over the top of them, and then I have the grid underneath. So effectively, the tension rods go in between the light and the softbox around it, and I'm pretty sure I had the grid on it at the time, and I think I might have actually had the grid off the big softbox now I think about it. And then I just run the cable from the Falcon Eyes all the way along the wall and down the side, so it's out of shot. Setting up a top light can be annoying, a bit tricky, but it's so worthwhile when you do it. The difference it makes is, I get that nice kind of hair light, but I think as well, especially on the hands of the guitar, it really adds an extra depth, an extra element that without it would have lost a lot of that detail. I'm actually getting way more into top lighting in general. I just find it a really nice look. One that's actually probably more common in Hollywood films, feature films, than people realize. I think on YouTube, YouTubers always talk about have your big soft key there. And yes, that is very common, but top light is done a lot, as is just, backlighting and using the environment. Some of the photos that Charlie and I took after we shot the video, I'll just kind of flash through a couple now. Some of the photos had the softbox on the front, but the ones I prefer just use the top light. You get such a beautiful fall off and depth, and I massively enjoyed having that. Something I just realized now that I am stood in front of this is I actually mounted the big aperture light on this. I didn't have it on a C-stand, I had it on my film cart. So I had the top bar that comes up and over, and just had a clamp, one of those drum clamps, stuck it on that. I did that just to get this out of the way more than anything, but also just to have that bit more flexibility in terms of height, because the C-stand and the ceiling there wasn't a massive gap between them, whereas this is a bit shorter than a C-stand. So it gives me a few more options as to like the height I put it at. And the last thing to really mention is the Dolly. So I have an indie Dolly. I love it, I really like it. It's a bit dangerous. I have almost taken my fingers off with it. And it's it's very heavy, and I need a better tripod that actually fits. So you want a tripod that can fully extend out. The tripod I was using on it can only come so far before it stops. I haven't used a Dolly since I shot a fashion advert that went up in the O2 Arena, and I was in a studio on the Dolly all day for that. And since then, it just sat in the corner. So to get it back out for something very soft and subtle was lovely. I would have just used a slider if I'd had one, like a long enough one, but I have the Dolly and I thought, why not? And that's what I did. So that is how I shot Every Storm for Charlie Hendren, and very excited about our next couple of projects together. We've got 2 music videos to shoot together. Charlie's just like such a great person to work with because we complement each other's creativity really nicely, I'd say. He's got just brilliant suggestions as a creative in his own right, comes with an amazing skill set, and just like a really nice guy. There's always these choices we make as creators of when do we want to work for free, when do we want to work for pay. And you know, sometimes it comes down just to if you enjoy it. Like, I love working with Charlie so much because I get so much creative control or input on that as well. You know, it's a kind of win-win for us both, really. It's very different from an advert for a brand selling shoes or pens or whatever, when it's your friend you know for a long time and it's just making a music video with a musician and an artist that you really respect and admire. When you also get to have that kind of creative freedom, like, yeah, they're the times, to my mind, this whole you should never work for free thing. I think the word work is what confuses it. You shouldn't work for free in the sense of doing things that probably should be paid, you know, like an advert or brand film. But when you're creating for free, when you're experimenting or building something with someone, I think there's a lot of people out there who only think about the short term rather than the long term. You know, if you demand a certain amount of money for this one project, well, you probably lose that contact. Sometimes it's fun just to be creative with someone. I'd really highly suggest that you go and check out Charlie on Spotify. He's got a couple of really nice songs on there. And you know, keep an eye out in case he's performing anywhere near you. Top guy as well. I might make a couple more of these kind of live music things. Probably not in the same setting, you know, maybe with different artists. I'm not necessarily fussed about doing that though. I want to make narrative work, that's my goal. But yeah, overall, pretty happy with how this turned out. So hopefully you really liked it as well. Feel free to leave a comment with any questions about any part of the process if you'd like. So on that note, I will see you soon. Bye.